fought like a maniac, tried to chew off some cop's face. It took 6 pigs to take him down. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is, you know where that shit happened?
I fucking hate Florida!
What's up, DBS fans, horror fans, and everyone trying to make a film? It has never been a better time to make a film. And today we're going to talk a little bit, not about features, which is what we usually talk about. We're going to talk a little bit about shorts because I'm joined here by Bowen Watts, who has made a short, which is on our channel, that you go watch right now. So watch the podcast, watch the short, watch the podcast, because we're going to talk a little bit about how you can kind of further your filmmaking career with shorts. And he made an absolute fantastic short, zombie short, which I'm super jealous of because you guys know I've been trying to make a zombie short for so long now. And he also got the pleasure of working with Benjamin Newmark. We're going to go over basically how he came up with the concept, how he made the short, and basically the opportunities of filmmaking career. So, Bowen, appreciate you taking the time to meet with us and talk a little about the short. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. So before we begin, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you kind of got into filmmaking.
Well, I'm originally from Illinois. Started as an actor, doing mostly stage stuff. And, with a lot of actors starting on the stage, you kind of start doing that thinking, man, one day I'll do these auditions. Eventually I'll do something on the silver screen. I'll do something on TV, that sort of thing. But as I started watching older films, like more like the classic stuff, like, Scorsese, Coppola, that sort of thing, I started getting a bit more appreciation for the process of being a writer and being a director. Because one of my favorite things about being an actor is, particularly being a stage actor, is there's a lot of opportunity where you get to improvise. There's a lot of opportunity where you sometimes get to do a bit of writing for the character you're playing. So, with writing and directing, that just allowed me to be, I can write everybody's character. I can write the whole scene. So it just kind of gave me a new way to look at storytelling. And once I started writing, I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. I went to Full Sail Film School here in Florida. That's where I met my wife. And at the end of our tenure, I went for writing. I didn't go for filmmaking. So I'd finished up and I didn't have any portfolio for films or anything like that. And I was like, I'm running out of time. So we essentially hired the crew of the people who did her thesis project, a bunch of really, really great people. And you mentioned Ben, who is phenomenal in the film. But the other actor in the film who plays the lead role is a guy by the name of Terry Farley. And he actually played the lead role in a film by the name of Morgue that she did for her thesis project. And a lot of the creative people that worked on the practical effects for that film came and worked with us. So it was essentially, we were just all like, okay, let's do a film independent of obviously the school. They're not going to help us finance it. They're not going to give us equipment. Let's just use everything we've learned and make something with no guardrails, no safety, none of that, very run and gun. And that's kind of how the short film came about.
Cool, man. And so zombie stuff, it's always my favorite. Again, I've been trying to make a zombie movie forever. To make a feature zombie film is very difficult. You need a lot of special effects. You need a lot of people. And if you've seen our movies, it's usually one location, a couple of people in there. So what made you want to make a zombie film? Out of all the ideas, I'm sure you had a ton of short ideas. All filmmakers have a million different scripts and a million different concepts. Mm-hmm. What kind of made you be like, this is the one I want to run with? Did you have a lot of scripts and you're just like, this is the one that I feel the best? Or was this just like, this is something really cool. I think I can make a cool movie with this.
I had a few scripts that I wasn't quite sure which one was going to be the one. The script that ended up becoming Dead Men had actually taken a few different forms. But each one of those scripts had that Pulp Fiction opening, with the two hitmen getting out of the car, walking to the door. Each variation of the script had like a difference of what they found on the interior of the apartment. At one point in the script, they originally walked into like a possession, exorcism type thing. So it was originally at one point in time a very different vibe. But I remember when we were going over scripts and we were kind of taking account of what we had at our disposal, and the biggest thing was like location. And I'm like, okay, with this intro, I know we can film this in a way that looks cool. And I know we can have like an exterior into an interior shot, like continuous, because we have our apartment as the location. So I would say a big contributing factor with us doing Dead Men was the location worked really well. And another, like, I'd say the reason it changed from being more of like a vague paranormal threat into specifically zombies is, zombies are what got me into filmmaking. It might sound like I remember seeing the Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead when I was like 7 or 8, and it left such a lasting impression on me. And the thing about zombies and zombie movies, at least in my experience with Dead Men, is it was very easy to get everybody excited about doing a zombie movie. And you need a lot of extras, you need a lot of people. So it's important to be able to get, people excited to be involved with the project. And I say, hey, we're doing a zombie movie. You want to get covered in corn syrup? Most people jumped at the opportunity. So zombie just kind of came about in the sense of like, it felt natural. That's what got me into the process. That might as well be the story that got me through the process. And people just jumped on. So it stuck.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way. The Exorcist is my movie. That The Exorcist and The Thing are probably the two that kind of shaped my background to go in horror. Hence why we make a lot of shapeshifter movies and why we do a lot of possession stuff. But I mean, zombies also are up there with me. It's just, and that's good news to hear, because I do, we always have people who want to come in there and be a part of filmmaking and stuff, but it's still, cover them in makeup and do everything, and have them on set. And sets are difficult. They're long days is always difficult, but that's really cool. I really like the fact that you use the stuff that, is around you. So tell me a little bit about, when you're writing this, because obviously I could see some of your inspiration. I could see all these scenes you had in there. Was it longer, and did you have to cut it down, or did you start with, that core concept and kind of branch out? Take me a little bit through your screenwriting journey to basically get this. Cause it's like 8 or 9 minutes or 10 minutes long.
It's like 10 minutes, 11 minutes, 12 seconds, I think, with like the credits and everything. Originally it was a longer script. At one point in time, I think it was around 16 pages, and I did cut something. And something that I've found when it comes to writing, or like screenwriting in particular, I think writing in general is, I think sometimes you'll come up with a concept, which the concept I had was 2 hitmen fighting zombies. Like that was the bare bones of the concept, right? And as I was writing each draft, I was like, okay, so it's hitmen fighting zombies, but what's the core of what this is? You know what I mean? And originally in the script, the final sequence was actually after the car crash. Harvey, the blonde hitman, he survived, and he stumbles out of the car, and he sees Rob, our boy Benjamin Newmark, eating somebody. And it was going to be a confrontation, like a big fight scene, that sort of thing, which would have been awesome, but it would have been incredibly expensive. And we were shooting without permits as is, to be 100% with you. And I remember we did the last rewrite like a week or so before production. And I'm getting to that ending scene. I'm realizing we got to cut stuff just because some of this is going to be too expensive to film. You know what I mean? Some of this stuff it's just not going to go in the schedule. And I'm like, okay, so we need to make this ending a little bit more succinct. And as I was doing that, I was like, well, hold on a second. I think I might have found what is different about my zombies than just like zombies as a whole. And it relates to the whole like Shaun of the Dead thing. Is, in the ending in the film as it is now, we reveal the car crash, Harvey, turns in the car, and then Ben opens the door, which is, he's turned into a zombie. They're both zombies. They have that face off. But it's a direct reflection of the opening scene where Ben knocks on the door. You come in. He looks to him. It's meant to be like a direct reflection of that. And the ending scene actually became a moment to show that even though they've turned, even though they're no longer human, they've still retained a bit of their humanity. They're still, looking at each other. They recognize each other. So, and I apologize if this isn't like a very specific answer, but for me, like the writing process, it felt like I have the concept. Now, what can I explore in this concept? If that makes any sense.
No, it makes a ton of sense. And I think you nailed it, because the first thing, or one of my questions on here was that look at the end was like the Shaun of the Dead look, where they're zombies, but they're still buddies. And I also really like, some of my favorite movies are ones that the closing scene reflects the opening scene. It comes full circle. And I think that takes talent to pull off. And that's what I got from this. It was basically, it seems like it's going full circle. So I think that that's really cool that you did that. But just even for our stuff, for features, I always write the scripts with $1 million budget. Because you never know who's going to buy them. We pitch them all the time. We'll give you an example for The Devil's Hostage, which we shot in June. That probably, the original script of that was probably $1 million to make it. And we knocked it down to $250,000. And then we got a whole bunch of no's, and no one could, wants to raise financing for that stuff. And then we're like, all right, well, we got to do it our way. And we chopped it down to, under 50K budgets. But with each one, it's like, all right, what do you hold precious and what do you kind of cut? You got to cut the darlings. And I always do kind of like what you said, is it's the core concept has to be there. I can always work around and get more creative or use what we have when we have the core concept. But that's something where if I have to cut the core concept or change the core concept, then I might as well do something else, basically. And the core concept of The Devil's Hostage was, it was almost very similar to what you said before, was thieves break into a house and there is someone who they think is a kidnapped victim, and it turns out they are more possessed. So it's like once again, my version of Exorcist, kind of meets, like a break-in movie. So we had to kind of pull that stuff down. But at the end of the day, the core concepts are there, which is basically morality. The theme of the movie is morality, and how, would you steal a loaf of bread to feed your family? That's kind of like the thread we're kind of going with it. And it's always stayed true. And I think that as long as you have a strong theme, the rest of the stuff, if you're going to be an indie filmmaker, you got to figure that stuff out. So when you made this short, was this a proof of concept? Was it just something to basically record something? Did you want to make a feature? Or where's your game plan? Before you started shooting this, what did you want to do with it?
It's funny you mentioned that. Originally, when I was assembling the crew, we got the script together. I'm like, all right, guys, this is just meant to be like almost an exercise, so to speak. You know what I mean? We're out here. We're going to, put reps in, practice the techniques and whatnot. And, as it was getting edited, as I was sending it for like the CGI stuff and we were working on the color grade, that was obviously taking quite a bit of time. So as it was in the post-production process, I actually wrote a feature film to go with this. And the Harvey and Rob story worked into it as one of 4 chapters. So it ended up evolving into something that I think could stand alone as a feature story. But it originally started as, let's make a short film and let's do the coolest short film we can, And, you talk about how like sometimes people will I want to make this feature film, but I only have the budget for the short, or I really want to do this, but I only have the location for one scene. And, as a filmmaker, there's no shame in, and I'm going to give an example of this. There's like no shame in reusing your own stuff. If you look at a lot of Martin Scorsese's early short films, you can find a lot of them on YouTube. But a lot of the camera techniques that he used in Mean Streets and in Boxcar Bertha, in like his early, like the first 3 or 4 films, is all stuff he practiced in his short films. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen Mean Streets, but there's this one sequence where Robert De Niro's running from these guys that are chasing after him for money, and he's jumping from table to table, and it's this long, continuous shot. He shot for shot did that in a short film. You know what I mean? So I look at short films as like, you should try and make it the best short film you can. But even if you want to make a feature film, and even if this is just your outlet for that, you can still practice things you plan to do in like a feature film context. You know what I mean? So for me, I feel like short films kind of exist as like, you definitely want it to be its own thing and stand alone, but you also want to use it as almost like practice, for when you get to that next step, if that makes sense.
No, 100% makes sense. And, especially when I was starting out, we went straight into features pretty much. I do think that I would have been benefited basically from doing a lot of shorts and kind of just figuring out the camera techniques and stuff. Because with features, it's such a crazy thing to do. It really is. It's like you're doing 9 days, you're doing 14, 15 hours a day. It's very, very difficult. It's very stressful. Your brain is just completely fried. With shorts, basically you take a step back and, they're still intense and stuff, but you can kind of focus on, what you need to do. Basically, if you had a 10-page, 12-page short, you can do it in 1-2 days. We shoot 12 pages a day on a feature, and you have to do that for 9 days.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But I did. So if you guys go and look at on our YouTube channel, the first 8 movies, I used a different crew. And the movies just were not getting better. They weren't improving to what I wanted to do. After 8 movies, I wanted more progress. And that's when I changed up our model. I changed up our team, and I started to become the DP. And when I did that, I shot a lot of shorts. I have to find them. They are on Dropbox somewhere, but I did a lot of testing. It's what Bowen just said. Camera movements, different techniques, different lenses. And this is me learning how to become a DP, because you have to know a whole bunch of this stuff. But I always say with the shorts, it doesn't matter if you're shooting a short. It doesn't matter if you're shooting a feature. I had friends that came over and we just drank a whole bunch of White Claws and made a whole bunch of movies. We made comedy stuff and everything. What matters is when you press the record button and you run it and you record and you edit and you make something. That's the only thing that matters. But I'll tell you what's happening with shorts right now. There is a comeback. It used to be the old Hollywood system was you made a short, you have these big producers, you had these big companies come in, and you go out and you get funding for a feature film. Then that kind of pretty much died once Netflix came around. But I'll tell you what's coming back. Curry Baker, if you haven't seen it, I think it's a good time or a bad time, his TikTok comedy stuff. And he made the short, The Chair, and he did some other stuff. He just sold a movie, I think in Fantastic Fest, from his short form content to basically, it's called Obsession, and I think he sold it for tens of millions of dollars. And that's a guy who just did short form content. The other thing is our boy, the Hereditary director, Ari Aster.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had a whole bunch of shorts that he did that got him that movie.
Oh God!
So you're starting to see these things start coming back as far as like the shorts, especially with like Alter and the stuff that goes on there. Can't remember, man. I'm really blanking with names, but the guy who did the Lights Out short, made a feature film with Lights Out and has a whole bunch of stuff now. He did the Annabelle movie as well. If you can get people to like your stuff and get views on there, I think you can kind of take that and move it forward. So I do think it is definitely coming back. I think now with a lot of short form content with Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, it's a viable business model. And I think you were talking about your script going full circle. I think the shorts are going full circle, where this is how directors used to start all the time with shorts. You make your short and then you go pitch it for get more money. That kind of died out when you had Netflix come back. And now with TikTok and all these things, we're coming full circle. And guys, our YouTube channel has been blowing up. It's absolutely incredible, the growth in there. We are going to start doing shorts because it's stuff that we need to do. And I can pitch it to basically, in our distribution meeting and say, hey, if we can do some really solid 8 minutes, there's other stuff we can kind of go in there. So I'm on board with whatever content you're making. If it's on an iPhone, if it's on the Blackmagic, if it's on a Arri Alexa, as long as you're recording it, you're uploading it and putting it somewhere, you're in a good spot. That's all it is. And like what Bowen said, it's reps. You're learning on the fly. That's how we view every single one of our movies is We want to just get a little bit better with each feature film. We want to get one fan, get a little bit better. My job is done. That's what we're trying to do. So you have the script. You feel really good. Talk to me about casting, because this is another question we get a lot. Is like, how do you cast people? How are we getting these people in there? How did you find Ben? Talk us through your casting.
It's actually so funny is I had Terry cast before we had really even gotten into pre-production. I'd met him a number of times. I was like, this guy's got the right look. He'd be a great Harvey. And for the role of Rob, I'm forgetting his name by now because we haven't had any contact. It was an actor who I'd worked with on another short film that I had acted in. And he was this Italian bodybuilder, like 6'2", muscle-bound, long hair, like not Ben. I love him to death, but he's 5'6" on a good day. Yeah, seriously. And the thing is I remember everything was lining up, and I reached out to the guy who we originally talked to play Rob. He had the script, and he just ghosted us. And we're like a week away from production. Everything's already lined up, and I'm like, shit. We're kind of freaking out a little bit. And, we have an AD who knows Ben because him and I believe his father, I know the son, Noah Cruz, they just did a film with Ben called Shadows, I believe. I feel terribly sorry if I'm getting the name wrong. But I remember he had sent me Ben's audition tape because he just sent Ben a copy of the script. We had posted the thing on Backstage. It had been like a day. And he responded to it like it just went on his phone in sunglasses. And he just read the lines with an attitude that I wasn't expecting for the character. And it grabbed me. And he was really interested in the project, which I think this is really important for independent films, is when you're working with actors, you need to be working with actors who want to be working with you and want to be working on the project, especially for independent stuff. Like, that's in general. But the reason being is, like you said, you're dealing with 12, 15-hour days. Sometimes when you're shooting something on a budget, you're paying half a rate. You're paying a flat rate. You know what I mean? There might not be overtime. So you have to be working with people who are able to keep a good work environment. And Ben, the moment I talked to him, the moment I talked about the part, he was really interested. We came over, him and Terry did like a rehearsal. We walked through the choreography. And one thing I will say about casting is I sometimes feel I would rather change a character a little bit for an actor rather than find a less talented actor that fits the character slightly better. Because I think, the difference between like a screenplay and like a stage play is a screenplay is evolving, because as you're filming it, as the actors are improvising, something happens, the lines might change a little bit, the character dynamic might change a little bit. Ben made the role a lot funnier. He made him a lot more talkative, which ultimately worked for the script because it made Terry's kind of sullen silence, if you will, stand out a bit more. So for me, when it comes to casting actors, is don't be afraid to cast who you know. Don't be afraid to work with people who aren't traditional actors. Both Ben and Terry were traditional actors, but we had a lot of extras on set and stuff like that who did really good jobs for those moments of chaos. Just make a habit of trying to find people and work with people who are happy to be working on the project. They're happy to be making a movie, because I've definitely worked on sets where there will be an actor for short films and for feature films where it'll be a very independent vibe on set. And we'll have an actor walking in and they have like these SAG-AFTRA expectations. And it can kind of deflate the room and bring everyone's vibe down. So I don't know, for me personally, I think one big thing with casting is it's very important they can play the character. It's very important that they have talent. But it's also important that you can stand to be around each other for extended periods of time. Because that's a lot of what filmmaking is. It's just being around each other and bouncing ideas off each other for long, long periods of time. So if you don't have someone you can kind of work through that process with, you're going to have a long time on set, or at least that'd be the way that I feel about it.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on a lot of things, and these are absolute golden nuggets, guys. If you guys are making any kind of film, what he just said is absolute valuable advice. So I'll touch on a couple of things. We still get ghosted, or at least we don't get ghosted anymore, but people will back out like last minute. We've had this happen, not recently, I'm going to knock on wood, but we've had it happen a couple times, and it sucks, but we have systems in place to basically have this not happen as much as it did before, where basically after we select, or like we'll get our auditions, we usually get about 5,000. We narrow them down to 100. Then myself, Tegan, and Dylan will basically interview these people. And we have a set list of questions that I have. All the actors get them. If we record the Zoom meetings so that if like Dylan or Tegan does it, I can go watch them again. But basically we're looking for people. We're basically trying to convince you not to take this role. I'm telling you, you're going to be running the woods. You're going to be covered in blood. You're going to be sweaty. You're going to be working 12-hour days. It's going to be hot. We're in Florida, or we're in Georgia. We're in the mountains. We're doing all this crazy stuff to try and convince them not to do this movie. And you're like, well, Brendan, if you want them, why would you want them to not do the movie? It's because I want people who really, really, really want to do this. And there's a lot of them that'll do that, but there's also a lot of people who disqualify themselves. And I'm looking, like what Bowen said, I'm looking for people to pass the vibe check. Can they hang out for 9 days in a row with us for 14-hour days, 12, 14-hour days? And can they be cool? And can they be nice? Because a movie, you're very emotionally intense. There's pressure in there. There's a lot of stuff. I'm stressed out. Everyone's stressed out. You have to come in here and you have to create this awesome project in this limited amount of time. It's very demanding, and certain people will do it really well, and others, have problems, and you want to make sure you want to weed out the problem people. So we really just try and convince people not to do this project. Find the people who are really, really passionate and interested, like you said with Ben. That's why we hired Ben in Forest of Death, was he's very passionate about it. He didn't care about, going out in the woods in Gainesville for an extended period of time, and he brought life to the character. So since we've been doing that, our flake rate has gone down dramatically. The only other thing that I could give you guys advice as far as actors and reducing the flake rate is I talk to them every other day, or I at least will have somebody talk to them, whether it's myself, whether it's Dylan, whether it's Tegan. We are constantly in communication. There's not 72 hours that we go where they're not contacted by someone on my team. And what that basically does is make sure they're engaged. And if someone doesn't reply back to me in 72 hours, I'll call them and get on there, because that's a red flag, and that's not going to be good. The other thing you brought up that I wanted to highlight real quick was the blank slate for your scripts. All our scripts are basically blank slates. I write them, or I change the actors to the script once I get to know the actor. Two things this does: it gives them an easier time for the performance. If I could take, that actor and put them in our world of horror and have bad things happen to them, it's easier for them to play themselves, as opposed to someone completely different, some kind of crazy character. Now, we'll have some side characters and stuff where I'm like, I really want this kind of character. But for the most part, we take them and put them in there. We get a more natural performance out of them. It's easier for them. And it keeps them engaged. It keeps them, interested in the script. They can put in their own ideas. Almost all our movies now, it's just all our stuff is in pre-production. We work with the actors. They come up with a lot of the dialogue. They come up with a lot of ideas, and the scripts are more natural. You get a different set of eyes on it, because I'm always seeing from the top down. I don't see the forest from the trees. The actors are only looking through their own lens, and I think the scripts turn out much, much better. So I thought those are two great points you brought up. Let's get into actually shooting this thing. So you got the script, you got it casted. Tell me what day one was like when you're shooting this.
Day one, I was going to say, and I'm not going to count the pre-light, because we did like a pre-light the night before, but that doesn't really count because you're not doing anything. But the first day of this was quite wild, because, for years at this point, like leading up to this moment, I was like, oh, I'm a writer. I want to be a writer-director. I want to be a writer-director. It's always that I'm an aspiring, and it was right before I was about to do it. And I remember it very vividly. I was out there having a cigarette. They're getting the location set up. Everything's getting lit. And production designer, my wife now, walks up to me, and I go, all right, so what are we waiting on? She goes, I'm waiting on you. And I go, oh shit. No. But the thing is like, I had this moment of, oh God, they're waiting on me. Now it's time for me to do the job. I got to go over there and I got to go direct. I got to go, do all that stuff, which, I was able to do. But I would say like, the big thing was, kind of how you said similarly, like you're reaching out your actors like every day, every other day to kind of keep them on board, keep the momentum going, is when it came to making this film, and I think this just goes to making films in general, so much of it was momentum. You know what I mean? It's building up momentum, because I remember the night before production started, I was like, even if I wanted to back out right now, I couldn't. Because we got actors showing up at 6 a.m. We got lighting people showing up at 5 a.m. The equipment's already on its way, so getting to that first day was a matter of momentum. And when you're making a film, especially like in the early stages, when you're casting and you got a script and you're still just very early, sometimes it can almost feel awkward to like try and be on top of people, like, hey, we're in pre-production, we got to get this next thing. It can be almost uncomfortable, but the big thing I learned is you got to get comfortable being uncomfortable and not worry about being annoying. Because if you're worried about being annoying, then that's going to be a problem. Because as a director or as a producer, sometimes you got to be the most annoying person in the room to make sure something gets done. But like to just kind of like, I would just say like, and I know I already said this, but like the thing that just keeps going in my mind is just a lot of it's momentum. A lot of it is you get the core group of people together and you say, we're going to do this on this date, on this location. And once you have those two things figured out, that you're doing something at A place at B time, once everyone's there, it's just a matter of figuring it out. My biggest thing is, in my biggest journey, I feel like in the world of, film and writing and stuff like that is, and this is, I'd say, like a big piece of advice for everybody, is you're never going to learn until you do it. And you're never going to feel qualified to say you know how to do something until you start doing something you don't know how to do. I don't know if that doesn't make any sense, but I think you're getting what I'm saying. It's, I wish I had a better, more concise answer. I'm sorry if I'm like rambling, but it's got to set a time, got to set a date, you got to find a good group of people and say, we're going to show up at that place and make something happen.
No, I totally get it. And this is why I always say, when everyone, comes to me and says, what advice, how do I start my own thing, is just make your stuff. Because the weird thing with films, and this kind of starts with my journey, is I have a publishing business. This is how I kind of got into this. I said, it'd be really easy to turn books into movies. We can do that. It's not, if we have best-selling books, we can make movies. And I'll tell you what, I was really wrong. Movies are the hardest art form out of anything, because not only do you have to do your part right, the cinematographer does, the audio guys, all the people that are involved in this process. You're talking about, on some of these sets, 40, 50, 100 people have to do a very, very good job. Because if one person screws up or doesn't give a good performance, your movie's not going to be that good. And it's really, really, really hard to make a movie. And I think a lot of people just don't understand how difficult it is. And you can sit there and you can watch YouTube channels, you can read books on screenwriting, and until you actually do it and realize what's going on, it's just, there is no way to tell you how to make a movie through a video. You really have to do it yourself. And I think that's the best way to kind of go with it, because the best way I describe making a movie is, the famous, I think it's Mike Tyson quote, where it's like, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. Well, once you say action for the first time, you're going to get punched in the face. And then really it's how you kind of adapt to it and kind of overcome. And I think a lot of really good filmmaking, or at least our philosophy and how we're getting better, is we make mistakes and we just don't do that mistake again. It's okay to make a mistake the first time, just don't repeat it. And I think a lot of really good movies, or at least movies that are, you know, decent, they just don't have any bad glaring mistakes in there. And they're like, okay, that was a good movie. It, you know, it wasn't the greatest thing ever, but that's your foundation. And from there, you can kind of pivot to doing really great scenes, really, really cool stuff. In our movies, when I watch them now, I'm like, all right, 10% is like really, really good. I'm like, we nailed that. That seems really good. You know, probably 70% is okay. It's decent. And then 20% still like, oh man, don't ever do that again. And it's like that for all the movies. But then we just don't do that 20% again. We get better. So I totally agree with you. I think that, you know, you just have to do it to kind of experience it, because the growth on the next one is so much better. All of our movies are you know, we're growing and getting better with each one. So tell me a little bit. I just want to ask this question as a personal question. How much did you sleep the night before you shot the movie?
Oh God, barely a wink. I remember like I think first call for lighting people was like 6:30 a.m. or 6:45 a.m. in primary locations, my apartment. The place is, you know, the interior location you see in the film. That's where I was living at the time. And keep in mind, the set was like totally dressed for like a week beforehand. So it's just like 2 a.m. I'm just pacing around my apartment. There's a half-eaten corpse on the floor. And I'm just like, yeah, we're doing it. But barely a wink. I was very nervous. But that's the beautiful thing about Red Bull energy drinks. You know, that's one of the keys to this industry, in my opinion. Caffeine.
So talk to me about the first couple shots you guys did. Did you start slow? Did you go right into it? What was the first thing you shot in this short?
First thing we shot was, we actually shot the first shot you see in the film. That's the first thing we shot. Harvey sitting in the car, you know, and part of the reason we did that was it was just really simple, all natural light for the most part. I think we had a bounce, but that was it. And, we knew that we wanted to establish where the car was as like our first shot, especially like as a crew. So when we came back to that scene later, we could, we just had an understanding of the geography for when it came time to film the riot sequence. And if I can actually pull this out. One of the reasons we shot that scene first was it was also like one of the scenes we had, you know, like the most efficiently storyboarded. That was something I did with this film that I'm doing like times 10 with my next film. And you don't need to do this for every scene in the feature film. But when it comes to short films, I think storyboards, they don't have to be super detailed, but I think storyboards are really good because it gives you an idea of that image you had in your head. So when you get on set, the lights are ready, action's been called, and you've been punched in the mouth, you don't forget about that plan. You know what I mean? Because you'll have all these ideas, you know, in your head, but the minute you're there and you have 3 technicians looking at you saying, hey, what's next? Or how do we fix this solution? What shot do you want to do next? Because we can't do this next one because of the lighting. So planning as much as you can beforehand, I think is really helpful. I think storyboards can help in that aspect as well.
Yeah, I think like your goal of a director, really everyone thinks is, oh, you know, it's bossing people around and making them act like you want to do. It's not that at all. The goal of a director is basically, and this is my job, is basically taking the image that I have in my head when I'm reading the script and getting it in the actor's head as quickly as possible. And that's done through pre-production. As you guys know, I'm huge on pre-production. We spend a ton of time in pre-production. I send them other movies. I send them stuff we've done before. I send them as much as we possibly can. So when the time comes, you know, we're both on the same page. Because the last thing I want is the actor to be like, wait, what? Like, we never talked about this. That's not going to be good. Now, I am the DP. I shoot my own stuff. So I don't storyboard. I'm kind of against storyboards. Only because I am the DP, so it's my brain already there. I'm skipping a step. And if you have your own DP, if you're working with a DP, storyboard mood boards, lighting boards, everything this stuff has to be discussed in length before, because I've worked with other DPs before, and if you guys are not on the same page, it is not going to be good. That has always been my hardest thing, was working with DPs. They've been very, very difficult. They said shots couldn't be possible, and I'm like, I think we can do that. And it got to the point where I just hired myself, basically. But as far as what he was saying, making sure you're getting shots, I have that, like, I'll have a list or a mental checklist of what I try and do. We shoot ABC coverage, so I will get one wide, which is our C shot, 2 close-ups A, 2 close-ups B, and then I look for inserts. And that's basically, if you get that, you won't sink the ship. You'll have a movie done. But if you are working with a DP, if you are, your first time being a DP, do as much pre-production as you possibly can. The only thing that I'm anti-storyboard is just because when I get on set, everything's so different than what I have. And I also know what shots we're capable of, and it's very basic. Basically, if you look at our stuff, it's all shoulder rig stuff, and we'll do some tripod stuff. I also am anti-tripod. I come from the James Wan school of shaky cam stuff, which is why I also enjoyed your short. I don't think there was any tripod stuff on there.
No.
But it's just basically making sure you're on the same page with either yourself or, the people who you're working with. The actors do like to know what shots are coming up as well. So that's all super important. And if you're putting together the storyboard, the more you could break down and the more you could put, effort into the script, it's just, you're more prepared. It's a preparation exercise as well. So let's get into that. Your shot list. Mm-hmm. At what point did you realize, we're way behind?
Probably the point I realized we were way behind is we had like 4 shooting days total. We shot 2 days one weekend, and then we shot 2 days the following weekend. And one of the days I realized we were really behind was, I would say it was our second day of production. We shot both our exteriors first before we did any of our interior stuff, and it was a post-car crash scene. Originally, we had actually scheduled a different opening scene for the film, which it's one of those things, sometimes things work out for the best even when you don't realize it, because I think the car being the direct opener was much stronger than what we initially had planned. But we cut a whole scene from the film, Also, on the first outdoor day, the last stuff we got was the backseat shots, like looking out as they're driving away and whatnot. And I wish I would have gotten a few more. I wish I would have gotten one solo kill, like, someone's running after the car and they get tackled, football style or something like that.
So when did you feel like you were behind on your shot list, or things started to just, take longer than you anticipated? And I asked that because this happens to us almost immediately every single time.
This happened. One thing I also want to say, and this is the big thing about why it's really important to do it, is because it happens on every set. Like, you can, in planning is extra important, because when you were on location on the day, almost nothing's going to go right. I'd actually give you a better example when you put it like that, is the scene where Harvey and Rob walk into the apartment and they're talking. It's the one bit of the film that's ADR. It's a little bit noticeable, but given the film's very stylized with the film grain, I don't think it kills the project or anything like that. But that day was the one day that we had an overcast sky in Florida. The one time we needed the natural light for this big opening shot where we're falling through the whole thing, we get an overcast sky. And we were running out of time, and it was getting to a point where, the sun was falling, and I'm just like, we got to get this one right now. That was one that was definitely, I felt, if there was one shot or one sequence that, like, if I could go back in time and redo it or like schedule reshoots for, it would probably be that walk-up scene in the very beginning, because that one we went with the take that we had to get, not necessarily the one we wanted to get. But that's part of making a film, you know what I mean? That's the nature of the beast.
Yeah, okay. No, I liked that scene. I thought it was good. Was the dialogue improvised in there? Because it was a lot of like Florida man stuff, right? When they're like walking up there. I liked that.
I threw in, like, I made a reference to the fact that they're in Florida because I wanted to make a point of, like, these two guys are not from the area. They're driving down here for a job. But I remember Ben took that and really ran with it. He's like, I don't know what kind of drugs this fucking Floridian is on, or, maybe he's on Floridian bath salt. Like, he just kind of leaned into the joke, like, really, really hard. So a bunch of that was improv. Which I will say, when it came time to do the ADR, that made it definitely interesting because Ben almost kind of had to remember what he like did on the day to match up the timing because he kind of deviated from the script a little bit. But that was fun. Yeah, there's a lot of improv between those two characters.
Yeah, Ben, me and him have a special bond where he doesn't really read the script. He gets an idea of what we're trying to do, and we do a lot of pre-production. I don't recommend that unless you know your actors. But with Ben, if I can get the person I'm trying to get, through with him, if I can get once again that image that's in my head in him, I just let him go. We just did a project in August where he just rambled for 8 hours. And we're cutting together now, and he'll give you 95% stuff that's not usable, but that 5% that he gives you is absolute gems.
Cool.
But I can't recommend that too much because he's this very special person, and I understand how to work with him now. Although he did the same thing for my first project, and it turned out absolutely gold. If you guys watch Force of Death, which is for free on our YouTube channel, you can see his performance. So let's go into this. Give me, what is your favorite sequence or shot that you had in the short?
It's a really small moment, and it is the moment when they walk outside and they see that everybody in the apartment complex is starting to turn. We have that, the scene that I kind of used for that as inspiration is the scene from 30 Days of Night. I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
Fantastic movie. You have good taste in movies, my friend.
Love that film. Anybody who disrespects that film, I look differently upon.
It's funny. I'm going to see it in the Enzian. They're showing it for Halloween, and
really?
They have like 30 movies, and that was there, and that's one of my favorite movies. It's absolutely fantastic.
I might have to look into that. I'd love to see it on the big screen. But my favorite moment in that is there's a moment where a good friend of mine, who's one of the producers on the film, Jackson Phillips, he plays this big zombie. He's like 6'5", and he drags this woman out of the front seat of her car and starts biting her. And while we were filming that, because the whole, and I mentioned this whole thing earlier of like kind of using short films to kind of practice techniques that you want to use in a larger project, right? And one of the things that I wanted to practice with this was making 7 people look like a crowd of like 20 people. And one of the ways of doing that is just when you have your shot, have somebody go through foreground, background, then opposite direction foreground. And obviously that's just like a really simplistic, one person if that's all you got. But ideally if you can have 2 people coming through the background in opposite directions or 2 people coming through the foreground at different depths and whatnot. When you crowd the shot like that, it allows you to create the idea that way more is going on than what's actually happening on screen. So that would probably be my favorite sequence. The first few shots in that riot sequence where the zombies are coming out from everywhere.
Yeah, and honestly, so all I watch is indie stuff now. Well, I watch the big stuff in the movie theaters, but literally when I'm doing my day job, and any other time I'm watching every single indie film that comes out. I watch a whole bunch of shorts. And it's kind of like studying film. I kind of look at what did they do really well? What mistakes did they do? Oh, I've made that mistake before. What I took away from yours was you did a really good job of making this look like a zombie movie. There's a ton of zombies out there. And I really like that breakdown because I was like, how did he do that? And I was going to go rewatch it tomorrow, or actually today, because we're uploading it. You'll see this on Friday, and study it because I was like, this guy took probably, I don't know, you had 10, 15 people, maybe 20, and made them look like a zombie apocalypse. You did a really, really good job. The zombies looked like there was nothing that did not look like 28 Days Later in this one, which is really kind of crazy for a short and a budget. I was really impressed because my fear with the zombie movie was you're not going to get that crazy horde, or you're not going to get that intensity. You know, one zombie's not that scary. Even 28 Days Later, like they had multiple ones in there. And I was like, how do you kind of get that to make it feel like this is happening? It's a big threat. And I was worried that that would take too much money and we wouldn't be able to do it. But you were able to do it. I was like, oh, this is really, really cool. So I also thought that was your coolest stuff. So let's get into, you know, you talked about the opening shot. But let's talk about just overall production. If you could do something again, having the knowledge that you have, the reps that you have, what would be something that you would do differently?
Well, one thing I would definitely do differently is this is in when you're directing something, when you're producing something, you know, and you have a problem on set, whether it's with an individual, whether it's with a certain piece of equipment, you know, you could cast blame, you could do that sort of thing. But ultimately, I felt that there was a few people on our crew who did not necessarily understand I'm trying to think of the right way of saying this, is we had a few people that were there to mess around, so to speak. You know what I mean? And as a result of that, there was, I know since you're the DP, and I think I heard from Ben, you don't always slate your shots, right? Because
we're also anti-slate.
You know, yeah, I heard that. Yeah. Well, and the thing is I'm not going to lie. Before I did this film, I would have been like, that's insane. That doesn't make any sense. But after this film, I totally understand, because the thing that pushed our post-production process, and one of the reasons I actually had to step on as the editor, I didn't really have a choice, was the person who did our slates didn't know how to write the shots down correctly. So the slating wasn't usable. So we couldn't send that off to like a third party, like here's the shots and these order type of things. So in a sense, it kind of put me in a position where I had to be the one to do those first few edits, which in hindsight, I'm glad, because I learned a lot doing that. But my big thing, as I said, I guess I would say, is I wish I knew a little bit more about camera before I got into that. Because when I wrote the film, I'm like, I have enough of an understanding of editing that I know how to shoot for the edit that I want. But I did not know enough about cameras. And I think as a director, it is important to obviously know your job very well, but it's important to have an understanding of the people doing those jobs around you. So I guess this is just kind of a general thing, but I wish in hindsight I might have known a little bit more about cameras, so I could have maybe given a bit more of an educated opinion on certain areas. Maybe I could have stepped in and changed certain things, but at the time, I didn't have the knowledge, you know. And the whole thing about the slating is I'd never worked on camera team, I'd never worked camera department or anything like that, so I genuinely had no idea until we were going over the footage like a month later, you know. So Yeah, I would just, I would say my big regret is just maybe not getting everybody on exactly the same page. Because I feel from a leadership position, that is your job. You know, you could point fingers all you want, but ultimately I feel that if I would have done a better job getting everybody on the same page, like, hey guys, a lot of the people, because some people were volunteering, but a lot of the people that were working on this, like the key positions and stuff like that, they were bringing their own equipment, they were putting their own money into the project. Like a lot of us were devoting a lot of our time to this. And I don't know if you've ever dealt with this, you know, when you have a group of people that are like 100% committed and you have two people that are like 70% committed. It can kind of throw off the trajectory of what you're trying to do out there. Does that make sense? Or
no, I had the same problem. If you look at our first 8 movies, I had a big crews. We had a lot of people, and I didn't really know a lot about anything at that point. You know, I was still learning. We were doing our reps, but we weren't getting better, you know, to where I thought we were. I think the screenplays and the stories were getting better, but like as far as like the actual product, the sound was terrible. You know, the visual stuff was just not up to where it needed to be. So I stepped in, but it allowed us to take, you know, time to
I know what you mean though.
Yeah. Trying to go back and take some time, to, just decompress and kind of look at our production. And basically, I became the DP. I'm also the audio guy because we have lav mics and I listen to the audio. So I have the audio, I have the picture, and then I have my team with lighting. And once you figure out lighting and what works, and we're still learning lighting is the most important thing. But the biggest thing is to learn how to edit. And because I now know how to edit a scene, so I work backwards. I know what I can edit and what we can accomplish in editing. Then I know what I could shoot, and then I write that into the script. So if you look at our scripts now, I've gotten to the point now where I could give a movie to a third-party editor to kind of speed up our production process, because our production process has been the biggest sticking point for us. It takes us a year to get a movie out. And yeah, we're making 4 movies a year, but it takes a year for it to get out. They have to be quicker. And so I need someone else to come in there, and they could take the movie now, and there's only so many options they have because I know how to edit this. I'm shooting the movie like I'm editing it. And that speeds everything up as dramatically. Just everything is so much better now. But my job as a director is probably the least amount of time that I spend making these movies. Most of my time is spent editing, then it's cinematography, or actually probably say editing and then being in the leadership position that you said. Getting the movie done is the biggest thing that out of everything it is, if I don't get a movie done, we're in trouble. Like, I have to get it done. That is my goal. All the things to go wrong, if people, have issues, or if there's shots that we can't do, if there's location issues, if it's raining out, it doesn't matter. We have to find a way to get the movie done. Then cinematography and directing. Really, we do so much in pre-production before this project starts that I don't need to direct, and the actors will be able to make this movie themselves. And that's the level of pre-production we do. It's what we do on every single set. But I really think if you're an indie filmmaker, learn how to do camera, learn how to do editing, learn how to do sound, because if we get a bigger project and I could go work for my buddies at A24, I know how to talk to that DP because I've made movies with DP. I understand lighting, I understand camera technique, I understand movements. I know what good audio is. When we can't shoot next to a fridge or an air conditioning unit, and what I could fix now, because we've had such bad sound. I fixed all the sound. I know exactly how to fix it. We have amazing software now that fixes sound. But I could talk to a sound team, right? And then that day will be great because then I could just really focus on directing, which is really what I want to do. But as an indie filmmaker, I don't have the money to do all that stuff or hire people who have better experience. It's better just do it yourself, and learn how to do it. And since we've transitioned to this model, we've gotten much, much better. I'm editing the most recent movie, and we're probably going to get it edited fully in 6 weeks, which is crazy. To go from a year to 6 weeks is nuts. But do as much as you possibly can. The camera seems intimidating. It's actually really easy. Lighting is the harder thing. And then once you learn how to get good sound, it's not a problem. So totally agree with you. 100% there. So let's talk about editing this thing, because you said you had to step in as an editor. What was that like? Because editing is a grind. It is a lonely world because you're sitting down there and the movie is perfect up until you wrap. Everyone's excited that you wrapped and everything's great and this is going to be the greatest movie ever. And then you finally get to the point of editing it and it's just, oh, I messed this up. This is a problem. You have to fix all these things. And I think this is why a lot of movies, if you talk to Ben, if you talk to a lot of people, 80%, 90% of indie filmmakers never upload anything. So kudos to you for uploading something. They don't upload it because it goes in the void, which is where it just never gets uploaded because editing is such a bitch. So talk to me a little about editing and, that process.
And I totally understand. And I remember you saying that your biggest thing is just, we got to get it done. We got to get it done. We got to get it done. And that was kind of what was going on in my head when this thing was going through the post-production process. Because there are so many films, and I've worked in films as an actor, worked in films as a crew person, that never get done. Because the fun work that everyone's really enjoying, getting to be on set, that's the shortest part. Like I feel like everyone builds up the production process so much, and they forget how crucial and how important the post-production process was, or is, so to speak. For me, it was such a drag. It took me a long time to get acquainted with the software. But one thing I will say, and not on Dead Men, but since Dead Men, I did a project where I did some sound editing. And in regards to both the video editing and the sound editing, is as much as I really didn't like doing it while I was doing it, there was an immense amount of satisfaction from doing it, because I was able to kind of go, from brain to image, direct connection, kind of like how you mentioned with how you work as a DP, no need to storyboard because your brain's a storyboard and you're just putting your eye to the camera. And when you're editing as a director, it's very similar. It's like, oh, well, I want this to hold a second longer. It holds a second longer. But I would say the biggest challenge is just getting started. Because once you start and once you get moving and you see yourself making progress, even though it's slow progress, that is one of the things that keeps pushing you forward, right? And in doing that, that is what will make you a capable editor, or at least give you the ability to edit. Because before this, the most I'd edited was like a trailer on like iMovie. I'd never worked in Premiere before. I'd seen it. I had an idea of how it functioned. But with this, it was a lot of it was just getting familiar with the controls and getting comfortable trying to do something I'd never really done before. So I guess, like I said, this would just be a big thing, is just like, it sucks to pick up a camera and not know how to use it. It really sucks to upload all your files and stuff like that to the Premiere or Adobe or whatever you're using, because you're staring at a wall of just footage. You don't see your movie, you just see raw footage and whatnot. But if you never try and you never take those first steps, you will never develop the ability to shape that footage into a movie, and if you don't learn how to do that, at least just to a small level, like you don't have to become an Oscar-winning editor, but like you should know how to put your project together. And I feel like if you don't, you're handicapping yourself a little bit, because there is nothing that is a bigger pain than working with somebody who is editing part-time, even if they're editing full-time, and you're exchanging notes on a week-by-week basis, And there are oftentimes notes about these little minute details that if you knew the solution yourself, you could fix in a second, and then leave the important bits to the editor. So it was very difficult. It was a bit of a slog, but I'm really glad I did it. Even if someone else could have done a better job, if I wouldn't have done it, I would have never figured it out. So that's on that.
Yeah, so here's what's kind of interesting about that is that, as a director, and I'm making the films I want to make through either the screenwriting process, the editing process, the shooting process, or just, working with the actors in my directing style, the biggest impact I have in like my own style and my own personality comes through editing, which is crazy. So if you're not editing your own stuff, you're losing probably the most stylistic, your real true vision of your movie through editing. With cinematography on low budget, it's hard for me to do too much. Again, we're basic coverage, ABC coverage. Maybe we'll have some cool shots every once in a while, but it's very simple. It's very standard because we don't have a budget for a crane or a dollar or anything kind of crazy like that. Yeah, my color grade is one that I want because it's similar to Fincher and I'm a big Fincher fan. But okay, my style and my cinematography is just colors. It's not as much as editing where you have my pacing, where you have my cuts. You guys know I love montages. I put all that stuff in there. Big fan of quick cuts, hard cuts and cutting on sound. And then with like the script and everything, we have a lot of improv based stuff. Everything is changing. It's really like just not my style to the extent that I want it to be. So yeah, we have some dialogue stuff in there. I'll have like jokes and like callbacks and stuff would be it. But again, like if the editing is really where you'll see our movies. You watch all our movies, they edit it's very similar style that I like. And if you're not editing your movies, you're losing probably the biggest I don't know, I guess like stamp, trademark of your own style on your movie. And that to me is, you know, if someone else is editing your movie, they're putting their own stamp on it, basically. So editing looks tough. I always remember looking at Premiere, there's a billion buttons. It really just comes down to the razor tool. Can you cut it? And can you edit it? And then put it together. Pacing is the biggest editing thing. If you can learn how to properly pace a scene so it's not boring and it keeps everyone's attention, you'll be in a much better shape. You'll make a much better product. You'll make a much better movie. So let me just talk to you a little bit about your style, because we had talked about, you know, Transpotting, and then there's a lot of Shaun of the Dead in this one, a lot of fast cuts. Talk to me about your inspiration, either through editing or just kind of putting this together, because there's a lot of really cool movies that I saw that were in this.
Well, thank you. Well, one big thing I would say is, and a bit of a moment of realization I had when I was making this project is, I feel like every writer, director, creative, they're always kind of searching for their voice, so to speak. You know what I mean? In a sense, they're kind of trying to find what is their genre, what is their lane. And for this one, it was like, I love horror films, but I'm also a huge fan of gangster films. And for me, I was like, what about a genre subversion? You know, where we feed somebody the first act of a crime drama, but then force them into the second act of a zombie film. So for me, what this was I just wanted to try and do something that was a bit of subversion of expectations that allowed me to play in two genres that I really liked. My big thing with this one was I didn't want to kind of like constrain myself to it being one type of film, if that makes sense. Because like you said, there's a lot of different films that show up in this one. You know, there's a lot of horror stuff, like, you know, Dusk Till Dawn, 28 Days Later, Shaun of the Dead, horror comedy. But there's a lot of Goodfellas in this as well. You know, there's a bit of Reservoir Dogs in there. So for me, it was about finding a story, in finding a film that put together the different films that I liked into one thing. That's kind of what it was for me. And I do want to bring up the editing thing, and because I don't know who said this. This is an old quote, but I've heard people say that a film is written 3 times. It's written once by the writer, once by the director, and once by the editor, right? And I think that is really, really, really true, because if you're a writer who's never directed, you're not going to understand that a script is a breathing document. It's something that is always changing and sometimes has to change the moment of. Sometimes during a certain scene, sometimes you have to throw it out. Like you don't want to do that, but sometimes that's what it is. Because a movie is not just a white paper with black words. It's images, it's music. And like you mentioned with the pacing thing, is the way you pace a scene can determine whether or not it's comedic or it's tense. You know, the opening when they first enter the apartment, I got a lot of great stuff when we got Ben's coverage that unfortunately I wanted to use it, but in using his moments, it made the scene more comedic, which ultimately affected the tone, because I wanted to do something that felt tense and serious and then kind of becomes a more balls to the walls type of thing, with the second and third act being zombie apocalypse. So yeah, I don't know if that answers that in a succinct way, but that's how I feel about that.
No, I mean, I 100% agree. I think the script is a tool to get everybody on the same page. But when I'm directing, I'm always looking for organic stuff that comes naturally, or try different variations of stuff, because, you know, when I'm in the editing room or when I'm shooting, what's on that little monitor and what I feel is best, most of the time is not the best takes. It's a lot of different stuff. When I have like my editing down here, everything's a little bit different. But again, the disclaimer from this comes from, I write these things, I direct these things, and I edit these things, but the actors sometimes will be like, well, this was in the script, and multiple times on the set, I'll just be like, fuck the script. Like, we're doing something different here. This is not working out, or I found something way cooler, and they're like, oh, what the script says. I'm like, fuck it. We're going to do this live, and we're going to get something much better, because what I'm seeing now with my own eyes, what I'm feeling, because when you get a really good take, everybody on your crew is just like, whoa, that was really good. I'm like, all right, let's lean into that. What I wrote was terrible. It was trash. Let's go with this. This is so much better. And I think a lot of people hold their script precious, and you have a right to do it. You probably wrote it for years and put all your effort into that. For me, it's just really a tool to get people on the right page. A lot of our stuff is either improv or we do different things, and the more natural stuff, it all flows out, and it's always the better stuff. So the more I've leaned into doing that kind of stuff, looking at what we have with our surroundings, is there really cool lighting here? Are we getting really, is this staircase really spooky? Can we do something in this room? Is this the best place to do this pop scare? Or we'll do another pop scare. It's a like you said, it's a breathing document. The more you can get away from locking this down and, being like Sorkin, where they have to say, and pronounce everything correctly, the better you're going to have. If you have a big time budget and you have a ton of time to do all this stuff, more power to you. I wish I could do this one day and have everything locked down completely. But where we're at with indie stuff, flexibility is big. So I 100% agree with you. I think that is a great insight into doing this stuff. So let's talk about finishing the project. I always talk about getting feedback. Did you show it to other people? What was the feedback? Did you make any changes on the feedback that you received?
I will say this. As we were editing the film and the effects were getting their final touches, we of course had a few different versions where we're going to hold on this for a moment longer. We're going to cut short here. And I think there was maybe 3, maybe 4 rough drafts of that final cut with the finished effects. So once I had it finished up, I I reached out to some other filmmakers I'm friends with, some other writers and stuff I know. And I think this is really important. I think you should find people that are not in the film industry, not in the creative space, not doing any of that stuff, just regular general audience people to watch your film as well. Because sometimes those people will give you your best notes. Because, and as you mentioned, Brendan, I'm the same way. When you're a filmmaker and you're watching a film, whether it be independent or Warner Brothers, you're always watching, oh, well, so that's how they did that. Oh, well, so how do that part of your brain is working, right? You're intellectualizing a lot of what you're seeing. But when you show it to somebody who's just a regular person, just a regular day job, who just watches movies for fun, that part of their mind it's not working like that. They're just enjoying the show. And I think that's really important, because I feel like sometimes as a filmmaker, you can get really stuck on things in the edit that only you can see because they're there. And you do need, when you're getting that final copy of it, it's important to show it to people who have a few degrees of separation, because there's a lot of things that you're seeing that the average person isn't going to notice or even think about. So for me, I would say is show it to your friends who work in film, but also show it to your friends and family and people around you, or maybe even people you don't know who don't work in film, because they can provide really good insight.
Yeah, no, I think this is actually a really good, really valuable feedback. For us, obviously, I am my own harshest critic. I am always going through, I wish I would have done that better. I messed up here. I was really cool in my head. It didn't work out. So I'm editing this stuff. But then the next level is distribution. Outside of myself, they're the most important people. And there usually is all just pacing. They want a fast-paced movie because we get paid basically on ads, and then on Amazon and a lot of these other platforms. If people turn your movie off, you're going to get penalized on the algorithm. They want movies that basically you start and you finish. Our last movie, The Last Cabin, did so well because people turn that movie on and they finish it. It's probably a highest finish rate, highest watch rate movie, and that's reflected in revenue. Obviously, distribution cares about revenue because they are on the same side as you. So they're going to be more pacing stuff. Then I send it to basically, Dylan and Tegan, who are the crew for me, to see stuff that, that they can see that maybe I'm just missing. Their feedback is more horror side, more fans of horror. It's very different than what distribution has. So it's good to have that take. Then we have our core group of fans, that I send it off to for screeners. The problem with them is they love everything. So it's like, there's not, they're like, I love this is the greatest movie ever. I'm like, well, did you find anything else? Well, not really. It's good. So it's not really good. But then finally, it's my friends who are not filmmakers, not involved in the process, not a fan of DBS. They're just friends. And I'll have them there. I try and watch it live with them to try and see their reactions, especially a lot of our stuff is pop scares. I want to see which ones are making them jump. So I can leave that. If they are falling flat, I try and redo them, or I cut it, or just try and, fix it up a little bit. But that's kind of like our triangle of, basically, how we distribute this stuff. And then obviously once we release it, I go on Letterboxd, I go on IMDb, I read every single review. And, a lot of that stuff is just, it's hard stuff because for indie stuff, it's budget related. They're seeing our stuff, up against, we competed very heavily with Clown in the Cornfield when it first came out. Clown in the Cornfield was a $5 million movie. Our movie was, I think, $15,000 for Last Cabin. So there's only so much I could possibly do, but there is really good feedback in that stuff. A lot of people brought up really good points. There's a lot of stuff that I've learned that we're going to apply to the next movie, but you have to get feedback. Don't be afraid to show it to people. Get as much feedback as you possibly can. It's really important. It helps you out. Again, our goal at DBS, and it also sounds like you have the same goal, is to do this, learn from it, and then do something else. So to segue into that, let's kind of wrap this up here. Give me, maybe top couple things that you learned, the lessons you want to learn. If you make another one again, what would you focus more energy, more time on? Or what would you just, once again, coming back to, I get more valuable things, that mistakes that I've made in movies where I'm like, I will never do that again. So if you had the opportunity to make another feature, another short, or just redo this one, what are your takeaways? What would you do differently?
Well, I can definitely tell you and I can give you some pretty good specifics. We're currently, we don't have a budget yet, but we're in the very, very early stages of pre-production for the next short film we're doing. And one thing we're doing differently this time is far more pre-production. One of the things with Dead Man, especially because it was the first film that I made as a director, you know what I mean? It was me kind of pitching this idea, hey, do you guys want to help me make this film I wrote and want to direct, which the first one you do is almost always going to be the hardest pitch to the people around you because you don't have any proof of concept to kind of show them. So with Dead Man, the pre-production was like a month. It was like 30 days, you know what I mean? We hired the crew, we had the equipment, and we got everything set up in October, and we filmed it the first 2 weeks of November, Whereas with this one that I'm currently working on, I want to have a better understanding of everything we're going to have on set. All right. You want to bring this lighting kit. Why? How does it work? All right. I want to shoot this with 2 cameras and I don't want to have to do 10 lens changes. Can we find 3 focal lengths that are good that we can get these shots with? You know what I mean? So I'd say my biggest thing for this next one I'm working on is preparation. And number 2, this is a general thing, but this is something that I felt we were lacking a little bit in the first one, is sound. Sound is more, this is one of those things that almost sounds antithetical because it's a movie, but sound is more important than your visuals in a lot of scenes. In a lot of scenes, your sound needs to be A1. If your sound is 100% and your visual is 85%, it'll sell it. It'll sell it. But if you have 100% image, but you have white noise crackling through your audio, or you have ADR that you recorded a year after you wrapped principal photography, you know what I mean? That might throw that shot off a little bit, Again, one of my biggest regrets is that opening bit we have, a large portion of it is ADR, which again, like I said, due to the stylistic nature of the film, I don't think it ruins the project by any means, but I wish we had a little bit more prep time so we could have one and done, did that with proper audio. So just audio, and prep. Those would be the two things I'd say.
Yeah, 100% agree. I see a definite correlation between how good the project turns out and how much pre-production we put in there. We had a lot of audio issues before. We use lav mics now. We have a ton of software that helps us clean it up. I think I can fix any issue now. Honestly, I was like looking at stuff that we were doing today, as I'm kind of putting together the first draft of this new movie, and it's like mic pops and like there's crazy refrigerator stuff. I'm like, it's fine. Like we can take care of that. The other editor was like, you sure? I'm like, 100%, not a problem. So that's always really cool. And it's definitely to see your growth on the second one. I'm really excited. I do want to talk to you a little bit about your future projects, but I forgot one question because I really want to bring it up because it's something that we struggle with. I think a lot of indies struggle with. It's set design, and yours was amazing. So please explain to me how you made your apartment look that awesome.
I would love to explain it to you. Well, I have to give all the credit in the world to my wonderful production designer, Mars Sarmento. One thing I will say, in the world of film, before I did directing and stuff like that, I did a lot of on-set work, and it was predominantly in the art department. Now, depending on the level of film, your art department could be your department that covers everything from props, effects, and wallpaper, or it could be 10 sub-departments. But what I want to say is it is really important that you have somebody that can take your location and make it far more interesting. Like, because I can give you an example of something that Mars did with the wallpaper that I never would have thought of, right? We buy like, I don't even know how much worth of peel and stick wallpaper. And it's like 2 days before shoot. There's a bunch of stuff we got to organize. And she has this watered down paint. And she's going in all the corners of the room and doing this watered down paint. And I'm like, what are you doing? I don't understand what you're doing. And she's like, no. This is really important. This is going to add depth on camera. If I don't do this, it'll look flat. And I was like, okay. She was 1,000% right, So one thing I will say when it comes to just that in general is find somebody who knows production design, or at least has an understanding of color theory and how that is going to interact with light. Like, and just another quick example of that is originally from like the moment I wrote this script, I was like, I want this to have dark red, maroon wallpaper. Like that was one of the things I had in my mind. And she's like, I hear where you're at with that, but that isn't going to look good because we have a lot of blood and gore. So what you really want to do is do dark green, because that's going to be the exact opposite of the color spectrum, and it's going to make those reds pop even more. And again, my brain just doesn't work like that. And so just to kind of round all this out and say, is one thing that's really important is knowing the people that you're hiring for these key positions. And because if you have somebody who has a totally different knowledge base than you do, a totally different skill set, and you trust them, you can allow them to do their job to the best of their ability. And, like I said, I wish I could almost tell you more, but I got to give a lot of the credit to her. Her production design is what really carried that location. So a lot of it was planning, color theory, and that location is in the film for, I think, like 6 minutes, 5 minutes. It took us a month and a half to make that room look like that. Like you said, the pre-production process was like a month. Like the moment we planned on making that film and that was the location, we started working on the place. So that's another one of those things I think is kind of, it's prep, and also think about colors. That would be the two things I think if I could kind of boil that down to anything.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you what, it looked fantastic. We might have to have her on the podcast, just because one thing I see with indie films is we don't get to pick our locations. we have to use what we have. Especially for us with horror movies, it's really hard to get a creepy house. We figure out ways to do it. My specialty is not wardrobe. My specialty is not set design. So I lean on, people to help me out, but we are slowly figuring out tips and tricks. Mm-hmm. But I do think if you're an indie filmmaker, we are going to do some kind of special or some kind of tutorial on what at least we've learned, because it does help out. It does make a difference, because if you go look at our earlier stuff, they all look like nice, clean Airbnbs. And you can't make a horror movie when everything has like that fake Airbnb look. It just is not good. And it was tougher. We've gotten better, but when I see something like that, I'm like, wow, he did a phenomenal job. They did a phenomenal job. It was something that I was like, this is that, and having all the zombies running, were like the two things I was like, all right, I got to ask this guy how he did that, because both of those are absolutely fantastic. So you made the short, you got it out there. You guys can watch it on our YouTube channel. Tell me about the next steps, what you're planning next, how you're going to kind of use this success to, further your career.
Next plan is a short film. We got a third draft of it. It's starring our good friend, Benjamin Newmark. Right now with that, I'm kind of in the process of finding actors, because one thing I will say about this next film we're doing is we're kind of going in the opposite direction of Dead Men. With Dead Men, we wanted to see what is the craziest thing we can do with this limited amount of resources. Whereas with this next film, the working title's it's Hold'em. It's about a gambler who gets trapped in a time loop. He's forced to play the same hand of cards over and over and over and over again. Right. And the thing with that one is we definitely have a big moment of, blood and gore. So people get shot, someone gets their head blown off. But most of that film is going to be people sitting in a room and talking. So I'd say the next challenge is going to be refining some of the stuff, like I said, the sound, being prepared so we know exactly what shots we're going to get, how we're going to get them, where we're going to get them, and how we're going to edit it together. So right now, I'm in the process. I've got a few actors together. I'm planning on meeting with one of my camera people sometime in the coming months so we can maybe do like an inventory of all the equipment we have. And I will say, I guess my next step with this is now that I have my film posted somewhere, I can, it definitely is going to look a lot better than sending a privatized link. So that's definitely going to be one thing. I'm going to be able to throw that into the pitch deck when I'm trying to get money for this thing.
I mean, do it. We'll try and boost it as much as we possibly can. I think that's helps out. I'll tell you, they do. And distribution cares about those numbers. They're all about the numbers. But no, man, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on here. I think you dropped a lot of golden nuggets of just valuable insights and stuff that you've learned. I really enjoyed Dead Men. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. It had such a cool, unique style. And it just is really, really cool to see just how you edited that together and how you made that movie. So it was, really cool to talk to you going through this process. I'm really happy that Ben reached out and got us connected, because I just really, really liked your style. I can't wait. The Gambler one sounds absolutely fantastic. That is a really, really cool concept. So we'll wrap it up here. Any last closing thoughts, if you can give to any other filmmakers who are like, hey, I want to make my first short, any last advice that you could give to them?
Before I say that, I just want to say thanks again so much for having me. It's been a privilege. I really enjoyed doing this. It'll definitely talk to Mars. I'm sure she'd love to do a show and give you some stuff and insight about production design. But my big thing is don't wait for the perfect moment, because the perfect moment's never going to come. You just have to do it, And this isn't my piece of advice. I remember I heard Robert Rodriguez say this in an interview, is too many filmmakers focus too much on making the perfect film rather than making a filmography, rather than having a body of work. And I think it's so much more important just to keep making movies and keep getting better than hunkering down and hoping and praying that this script's gonna be the one. This one's gonna, just forget all that. Just do it and enjoy doing it. Because if you don't enjoy the process, if what you're looking for out of this is success, fame, and fortune, you're never gonna be happy. So just do it and learn to enjoy the process. That would be the best thing I could say.
I mean, I couldn't say it better myself.
Yeah.
That's our whole philosophy, is to make a movie, learn from it, get better, make another movie. We look at our stuff as almost like software updates. We're getting better with each little one. A lot of fun for us. I mean, if you're in this for money, I'm sorry to tell you guys, there is no money in independent film. Maybe if you get into the big leagues, but where we're at right now, all the stuff just goes back into the next one. We are very fortunate to have the audience and the views that we do. I bless all of your hearts. I appreciate all the feedback and the watches. Everything is good. Well, actually, I'm going to say, if you haven't seen Last Cabin is now out on Tubi. Check it out. All our stuff, most of our stuff is on YouTube for free. I think all our movies right now are for free somewhere, so check them out. Please check out Dead Men. That movie, the short is absolutely fantastic. You can go watch it and then, come back here and see the specific scenes that he's talking about. But I really enjoyed it. We're going to link his socials and his contact information as well. So if you are looking for someone to scale up a concept, I really like this one. I think he would kill it with a feature film with the zombie thing. I'm really excited to follow his career because the gambling short that he was talking about sounds phenomenal. Anything I could do to help you out, I'm always here. But thank you so much, my friends, and good night, DBS. Check out his stuff. Check out our stuff. A rising tide lifts all ships. Until next time, DBS, we'll talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you.